Hey, my stuff got delivered to my parents' house. What's going on? Did you get the packages? I want you to leave, so I sent all your things there. Why are you saying this all of a sudden? I have a girlfriend. I've decided to leave you and marry her. What? Isn't that cheating? She's younger than you and doesn't nag. She's exactly my type. She's a complete upgrade from you. You don't stand a chance. Do you understand that what you're doing is cheating? Also, I'm about to have a baby any day now. I get it. You want me to take responsibility, right? I'll pay for the affair and child support. Is $220,000 or $40,000 enough for the affair and $1,000 a month for child support? While I was at my parents' house to give birth, my husband sent my stuff there. He didn't even try to hide his affair. For my high-income, elite husband, paying for the affair and child support isn't a big deal as long as he can marry his girlfriend. I'll give you more details later. I'll keep the house and live there with her. Don't come back. I believe there must be a God. Surely, God would punish my husband. Fine, I don't need you. Let's get divorced quickly. Yeah, I got it. I'll contact you soon. Thank you, I appreciate it. I don't want any more trouble. Right, I'm glad we can get divorced without any fuss. My husband misunderstood my final words of gratitude. I believe he will face difficulties soon. The house he said he'd take to live with his girlfriend. Actually, I'm Anna. I'm 29, and I work at a company. I'm shy and not exceptionally skilled at my job. Because of that, I thought of myself as a background character in society. But as I approached 30, my life took a dramatic turn. There aren't many good places near our office. There are good places, but they're either too small or too far from the station. It's hard to find one that fits our needs. I'm searching for a house with Ken, who will soon be my husband. We pore over materials from real estate agents and online listings, struggling to find the right place. Even though it's a hassle, I secretly enjoy looking for a house while snuggled up next to Ken. I always try hard to look seriously worried instead of letting my happiness show on my face. I'm at the peak of happiness. I'll give you more details later. I'll keep the house and live there with her. Don't come back. I believe there must be a God. Surely, God would punish my husband. Fine, I don't need you. Let's get divorced quickly. Yeah, I got it. I'll contact you soon. Thank you, I appreciate it. I don't want any more trouble. Right? I'm glad we can get divorced without any fuss. My husband misunderstood my final words of gratitude. I believe he will face difficulties soon. The house he said he'd take to live with his girlfriend. Actually, I'm Anna, 29 years old, and I work at a company. I'm shy and not particularly skilled at my job, so I often felt like a background character in society. But as I approached 30, my life took a dramatic turn. There aren't many good places near our office. The good ones are either too small or too far from the station. It's hard to find one that fits our needs. I'm searching for a house with Ken, who will soon be my husband. We pore over materials from real estate agents and online listings, struggling to find the right place. Even though it's a hassle, I secretly enjoy looking for a house while snuggled up next to Ken. I try hard to look seriously worried instead of letting my happiness show on my face. I'm at the peak of happiness. But when I said my life took a dramatic turn, I wasn't just talking about getting married. Marrying Ken, who works at a prestigious international company, added a big twist to my life. We live in different worlds, but we met through mutual friends, and surprisingly, Ken approached me first. I still can't believe it, so I often ask him, "Hey, what did you see in someone like me again?" Your modesty. Nowadays, a lot of women are strong and assertive, but I'm not into that. Ken always looks obviously annoyed when I ask the same thing repeatedly, but I love that he always gives me the same answer, even if he looks annoyed. When Ken calls me modest, he's talking about my shy nature. He initially approached me simply because he liked my looks. When I first heard that, I thought it was a bit rude, but over time he grew to appreciate my modesty. Given how happy I am now, I can forgive his rude comments. In contrast, what drew me to Ken was his decisive and confident nature. Keep gathering info on properties, and did you tell the wedding planner about the changes to the menu? I'm planning to call about the menu tomorrow. What? You haven't told them yet? Handle the important stuff promptly. Yeah, I'll be careful. Ken sighed and began tidying up the property materials. He often delegates various tasks to me, and perhaps because of his elite status, he sometimes talks down to me. We're not married yet, but is this what they call a dominant husband? Some people might find it hard to believe. but for a shy person like me, it's actually easier when someone directs me on what to do. That's why I believe Ken and I are a good match. As the wedding day quickly approaches, we still haven't found a place to live. Since we didn't live together before getting married, we really wanted to start living together right after the wedding. But since that seems difficult, we made a decision. We thought we'd rent until we had kids, but maybe we should just buy that house. Yeah, that seems the most realistic. Ken picked up one of the property brochures and placed it on the table. This house is nearly 40 years old, surrounded by newer houses. It has been unsold for some time. It's well maintained for its age, but it needs some work before it's comfortable to live in. Alright, we'll buy this house and renovate it right. Considering the renovation time, it won't be ready by the wedding, but it meets all our needs in terms of location and size. But are we okay to buy a house so suddenly? We're fine. Leave it to me. Ken looked confident. Most wives would be anxious if their husbands suddenly wanted to buy a house impulsively, but Ken's income is high and I also work, so it's not unreasonable. So we decided to buy a house right after getting married. Following my marriage, we even bought a house, and the elements of happiness were piling up at a faster and faster pace as if they were crushing my body. However, buying this house would later lead to an unexpected situation. After deciding to buy the house, we also had to find a contractor for the renovation. Of course, finding a contractor was my job. Since we'd be living there for a long time, I carefully searched for a contractor. However, with the wedding so close, Ken seemed to be getting impatient. Hey, did you find a contractor? Give me a little more time. I'm still looking. You're always so slow, but it's important. If I leave it to you, we'd never be able to live in the house. I'll handle finding a contractor. Alright, I'm sorry. As usual, while discussing our wedding and future life in Ken's room, he got angry with me. I felt bad for causing trouble by not finding a contractor and couldn't say anything in return. Once Ken started looking, he arranged everything within a few days, and the renovation began the following week. He's really efficient, as expected from someone of his caliber. With his speed, it's no wonder he finds me slow. While the house was being renovated, we had our wedding without any issues. Since the house wasn't ready, I moved into Ken's place. I was a little disappointed that we couldn't start our newlywed life in our new home, but then a different kind of happiness came our way. Ken, I think I might be pregnant. Really? Ken was overjoyed, bouncing around like a kid. We thought we wouldn't rush into having kids, but I didn't expect it to happen so soon. I felt the same way. We figured we'd have kids eventually and we're just going with the flow, so discovering I was pregnant right after the wedding was a surprise. I'm glad we decided to buy the house. 2 months after the wedding, the renovation was finally complete and we could move in together. It was so run down, but now it looks amazing, right? With a baby on the way, it was a good purchase. I hurried around our still sparsely furnished home, excited about starting our married life for real. But 3 months after moving into our house, Ken and I ended up living apart. Hey, did you check on that creaky floor in the hallway? No, not yet. I'll call a contractor tomorrow. But aren't you 8 months pregnant now? Use your vacation days and go to your parents' house early. What? I told you I'm planning to take maternity leave 6 weeks before. It'll be tough to move around in another month. Go now while you can. Okay, got it. When Ken suggested I go back to my parents' house early, it made me slow down, lingering over my dinner. We had already discussed and decided on having the baby at my parents' house, and the handover of my work for maternity leave was progressing smoothly, so taking leave a bit early wasn't a problem. But I wanted to spend as much time as possible with Ken at home. I thought Ken felt the same, so it was a bit of a shock when he told me to leave early. Still, I decided to follow his advice. The next week, I went back to my parents' house to prepare for the birth. Well, take care of the house. Yeah, don't worry about it. By the way, about the kitchen wall. Don't worry. I told you I lived alone for a long time. I can handle the housework. No, I mean the window frame too. All right, I'll take care of everything. Ken seemed to think I was being too persistent, so he gently pushed me out the front door. As I turned back, Ken was waving with a smile. I trusted that Ken would handle things well and decided to leave the house in his care. Mom, Dad, I'm home. Welcome back. It must have been tough, right? Not really. I'm okay. When I arrived, Mom greeted me at the entrance. Feeling a bit awkward about her concern, I averted my gaze. I didn't want to admit that I had spent $200 on a taxi from the house to here. Oh, you're back. Was it tough? No, not really. In the living room, Dad was there. I averted my gaze again at his words. Needless to say, my parents' house is comfortable. At home, Ken tends to be a bit domineering, and I did most of the housework, but here I just help out a bit. My parents are still in their late 50s, so they both work. Mom works part-time and comes home in the early afternoon, so I'm alone in the morning. I spend that time slowly cleaning and doing laundry for exercise. In the afternoon, Mom takes care of the house, so I have nothing to do. Having nothing to do feels oddly unsettling, so I end up following Mom around looking for ways to help. I want to call Ken and catch up on things, but ever since I came back home, he hasn't contacted me much or visited. Has Ken called you back yet? No, he hasn't returned any of my calls. I really need to talk to him. I wonder if something's wrong. He hasn't visited in a month. I'm worried. He's probably just enjoying his freedom and focusing on work since I'm not there. Mom peeled an apple, looking worried. I gratefully ate the apple she gave me. Mom is probably imagining negative things like Ken being sick or having an affair. But Ken is a capable professional, and we're about to have a baby, so I thought there was no way he could be sick or cheating. I soon realized how naive that thought was. One afternoon, while Mom and I were watching TV, the doorbell rang. Who is it? Looks like a delivery. It wasn't unusual to get a package, but Mom looked confused as she went to the door. I waited in the living room. I could faintly hear Mom talking to a delivery man, but couldn't make out the words. After a while, Mom came back, looking worried and flustered. Hey, your stuff from your house is here. What's going on? What? What do you mean? I didn't understand what she was saying and could only repeat her question back to her. I slowly stood up to check the situation and headed toward the packages that had arrived. What's this? What's going on? When I stepped outside, there was a moving truck loaded with boxes. I opened one of the boxes and found my clothes inside. I opened another box, and it also contained my clothes. It looked like all the boxes were filled with my belongings from our house. I didn't understand the situation, but since the packages had arrived, I had no choice but to accept them. We pushed all the boxes into an empty room at my parents' house. The room was completely filled with boxes. After seeing the movers off, I called Ken in front of the delivered packages. I didn't expect him to answer, as he usually didn't, but this time he picked up right away. Hey, my stuff was delivered to my parents' house. What's going on? Did the packages arrive? I decided I want you out of the house, so I sent all your stuff there. What? Why are you saying this all of a sudden? Well, I have a girlfriend. I decided to leave you and marry her. What? He called her his girlfriend, but that meant he was cheating, openly declaring it to me, his wife. I couldn't comprehend what he was saying, and I started feeling dizzy. Isn't that cheating? Well, yeah, I guess. We started dating before the wedding. Guys can get cold feet too, you know. She was kind to me when I was struggling, and we started seeing each other. I couldn't call off the wedding, so I married you, but I couldn't give her up. When I lived with her in her house this past month, I realized she's better than you, so I decided to divorce you. Living with her? You mean she's been staying in our house for the past month? Calling her a mistress is disrespectful. She's my fiancée now. She's a mistress because I'm still here. My vision, which had been spinning, suddenly cleared, and I found myself yelling at Ken. My mom, who was listening to the call, looked extremely worried when she heard the word cheating. Not wanting to upset her any further, I forced myself to calm down. You told me to go back to my parents' house early so you could live with her, right? That's right. She's younger than you, not as slow, and exactly my type. She's a complete upgrade from you. You don't stand a chance. Do you understand that what you're doing is cheating? And I'm about to have a baby any day now. I get it. You want me to take responsibility, right? I'll pay for the affair and child support. Is $20,000 or $40,000 for the affair and $1,000 a month for child support enough? Even over the phone, I could imagine the smug look on Ken's face. Ken is an elite and high-income earner. Paying for the affair and child support probably didn't seem like much to him if it meant he could marry his girlfriend. In contrast, I'm a nobody. There's no way I could stop Ken from divorcing me for her, so I had no choice but to accept the divorce. As much as I wanted to refuse the alimony and child support out of pride, as a regular employee, I needed the money. It was a bitter pill to swallow. I gripped my phone tightly out of frustration and shame. That's the deal. The divorce is final, and I'll give you more details later. I'm keeping the house and living there with her, so don't come back. I thought to myself that there must be a God, and surely God would punish Ken. Fine, I don't want anything to do with you. Let's get divorced quickly. Yeah, I got it. I'll contact you soon. Thanks, that helps. I don't want any more trouble. Right, I'm glad we can get divorced without any fuss. After hanging up, Mom looked at me with concern. I smiled to reassure her. Ken misunderstood my final words of gratitude. I believed that he would face some trouble soon. 3 months later, I gave birth to a healthy baby girl named Maya and was still at my parents' house. She was so adorable that I couldn't bear to be apart from her, even though I needed to start looking for a place before my maternity leave ended. The divorce was finalized and Ken agreed to pay for the affair and child support. I had no lingering feelings for my ex-husband. In fact, I felt refreshed after the divorce. Since we already settled everything, I thought I'd never have to deal with him again. But suddenly, he called me. He must have finally realized the situation. Hey, what's going on? What do you mean? The house. You mentioned something about the floors and walls, didn't you? Did you know about this? Yes, I knew. You hired a shady contractor for the renovation. Why didn't you tell me? I tried to, but you never returned my calls because you were too busy having fun with your girlfriend. Besides, I told you about the creaky floors before I left for my parents' house and asked you to check it out, but you were too focused on getting me out of the house quickly to listen seriously. Ken thought I was too slow in finding a contractor, so he took over the task. When he started looking, he quickly found someone and began the renovations. I was impressed with how efficient he was, but it turns out he chose the contractor based solely on price without checking reviews or reputation. So he ended up hiring a shady contractor. After living in the house for just 3 months, I noticed the floors creaking, cracks in the kitchen wall, and screws missing from the window frames. After moving back to my parents' house, I looked into the contractor and found out they were scammers. I tried to contact Ken to tell him, but he never returned my calls, and we ended up getting divorced before I could tell him. Because of you, the response was delayed, and now I'm having disputes with the contractor. They're blaming us, saying we lived in the house wrong for 6 months, causing the damage. The creaky floors, growing wall cracks, and poorly closing doors have all gotten worse. The house is a mess. That sounds like a terrible place to live. I've moved into an apartment to get out of the house. If I stayed, they keep blaming us for the damage. I'm talking to a lawyer, but for some reason, it looks bad for us. Still, I'm going to sue them. So your house is falling apart, and you're going to court. That sounds tough, but it's not my problem anymore. Is that why you called? That's right. If you'd told me about the shady contractor sooner, this might not have happened. So what? I mean, I'll keep paying $500 a month in child support, but can we lower the monthly payments for the $20,000 alimony? What? I was shocked that my elite, prideful ex-husband was suddenly asking me for a favor about money. We moved, right? So now I've got the land, house renovation loans, and apartment rent. I'm going to sue the contractor, but I don't know how that'll go, and there are lawyer fees. I might even have to pay for the house repairs myself. You said your wife is better at her job than I am. Doesn't she make a decent income? Actually, she was my colleague at work. I told everyone at the company that we got married after I divorced you, but apparently, there were rumors about us before that. So now, people at work are giving us the cold shoulder. Yeah, she couldn't take it and changed jobs, which cut her salary drastically. I can't afford to switch jobs too, so I stayed. But money is tight. Ken had hired the shady contractor himself and was now having a huge dispute. His affair had damaged his standing at work. It was a classic case of self-inflicted trouble. Despite his high income, he was just over 30, and all these expenses were tough to manage. But it was his own fault, and it had nothing to do with me. It sounds tough, but you need to keep your promise. Wait a minute. I hung up on Ken. His voice just before the call ended sounded pitiful, not at all like the elite man he once was. Feeling a bit down after hearing his voice, I spent some time watching my daughter sleep. In the end, Ken lost the case about the defective house. The shady contractor managed to avoid any consequences, likely due to their knowledge of loopholes and deceit. It seems that even the elite, as expected, were not able to meet the vices of the corrupt contractor. Ken wanted to repair the house, but there were too many hidden issues, and the costs were too high. Naturally, he didn't want to live in a house with so many problems. He ended up selling the house. Since it was full of defects, the building had no value, so he sold just the land after demolishing the house. The land sold, but the loan remained, leaving my ex-husband with debt. With the house issue resolved, he decided to change jobs. He figured the debt was manageable even with a lower income, so he left his uncomfortable workplace. However, his fall from grace didn't stop there. His new wife, who had to deal with the huge house trouble right after they got married, and the fallout of their affair being exposed at work, blamed him for everything. Their relationship deteriorated, and she eventually left him. Now my ex-husband lives alone in an apartment with a lower income from his new job and monthly payments for his debt, alimony, and child support. His once luxurious life as an elite is now a life of frugality. He foolishly pursued an affair, losing his money, house, and family in the process. Love is indeed blind. I plan to start looking for an apartment for my daughter and me soon. When I talked to my company about my child, they agreed to let me work shorter hours, but I don't need to change jobs. I'm grateful for that. Returning to work will be challenging, so I intend to fully enjoy the precious time with my adorable daughter while I can.
Hi, I'm Liz Thompson, 27 years old. Been married for 5 years with my husband James, who's 30. We have a little boy named Jack. He's 4. I used to work full-time, but now I'm part-time at the same job. James won me over with his determination, and that's how we ended up together. When James and I were dating, he was really sweet, but after we got married, he became controlling, like he thought he didn't need to make an effort anymore. He's super lenient with his younger sister, Jennifer, who's almost 20. Even though there's a big age gap, he spoils her rotten. Before we got married, I got along fine with her, but things changed. Jennifer started showing up at our place all the time, and James would drop everything to cater to her. It's like I'm just a roommate, and she's the queen of the castle. She never brings anything when she comes over and acts like it's totally normal to ignore me. As usual, James invites Jennifer to join us for dinner, even though it was just supposed to be the 3 of us. She accepts without hesitation, saying that's why she came. I quietly remind James that there's only enough food for 3, but he insists I give my portion to Jennifer since she's here. He even suggests I should always prepare extra in case she shows up unexpectedly. Jennifer apologizes to me, but it feels more like she's happy James is on her side. James scolds me for not being more accommodating to his sister. Feeling frustrated, I make something for myself and join them at the dining table. When Jennifer sees me, she asks James to have a private conversation, excluding me and my son from the table. This isn't the first time I've had to move Jack's meal elsewhere and eat separately. After they finish eating and I start cleaning up, I notice James and Jennifer chatting on the couch, leaving the dishes for me to clean. It feels like they see me as a maid, ignoring both me and my son. I sigh and begin cleaning up, getting ready to bathe Jack. As I approach them, James asked me to get a piece of strawberry sponge cake from the bakery downtown for Jennifer. It was nearly 8 p.m., and I knew it was time to bathe Jack and put him to bed. When I explained this, Jennifer complained to James, saying she really wanted the cake and that skipping Jack's bath for one day wouldn't hurt. James started getting angry, knowing the argument would persist until I agreed. Reluctantly, I agreed to go to the bakery. The bakery was about to close at 9 p.m., so I hurried to get ready, knowing I could make it in time. As I prepared, I overheard James and Jennifer talking loudly, criticizing me for being inflexible and questioning why James married me. Jack wanted to come along, so we decided to go together. As I stepped out, James shouted that we'd get a divorce if I defied him again. And Jack, though young, looked concerned. Trying to hold back my tears, I asked Jack what kind of cake he wanted. His eyes lit up as he said he wanted a cake with lots of apples. We chatted happily about cake on the way, momentarily forgetting the hurtful words. When we reached the cake shop, it was almost closing time. I bought 2 slices of strawberry sponge cake and 1 slice of the fruit-covered cake Jack wanted, though the options were limited. Back home, I served James and Jennifer their cake slices and put 1 for Jack on a plate, heading to the dining table. Jennifer remarked that Jack's cake looked better, And surprisingly, James swapped it with hers. When Jack protested, Jennifer ignored him and ate his cake. James justified it by saying he bought it with his money, dismissing Jack's right to choose. I was furious and confronted them, but James threatened divorce again. Jack stopped crying, but his worried look broke my heart. After a moment's thought, Jack began eating the strawberry shortcake that Jennifer was meant to have. "Mommy, this cake is delicious. I'm glad I got this one," he said, trying to mask his discomfort. It was distressing to see 3 adults subjecting a young child to such a situation. When Jennifer reached for Jack's cake, I quickly intervened, suggesting we eat in another room. I wanted Jack to enjoy his cake in peace. James protested, saying it was fine for Jennifer to have a bite, but I ignored him and took Jack to the other room. There, watching Jack savor his cake, I felt a sense of relief. Afterward, we bathed together, ignoring James and Jennifer, and cuddled up in Jack's bed. The next morning, Jennifer had already left when I woke up. As I prepared breakfast, I heard Jack crying and found his porcelain piggy bank, a gift from my father, broken with the money missing. Jack always said goodnight to it, as he did last night. I suspected James knew something about it. And when I asked, he admitted Jennifer broke it for money without remorse. As I comforted Jack, tears streamed down my face. It was heartbreaking to see James prioritize Jennifer over Jack's well-being. His callousness pierced me, and the mix of sadness and anger engulfed me. James, unmoved by our tears, complained about feeling gloomy in the morning, leaving me shattered. I couldn't hold back my frustration any longer and confronted James. "Don't you see how wrong this is, making Jack cry like this?" It was the first time I spoke out in anger. I never wanted Jack to witness marital discord, but I couldn't contain myself anymore. James didn't respond. Instead, he stormed off to the bedroom and returned with divorce papers, thrusting them at me. "If you're not happy with me, let's end it," he said before leaving for work. Jack had never cried over anything involving James and Jennifer before, but since last night, he had been inconsolable. I, too, had reached my breaking point. "Jack, let's take a break today and skip daycare, okay?" I suggested. Jack cheered, thrilled at the idea of spending the day with me. "Mommy's the daycare teacher today, right?" he said, his face beaming as he nestled on my lap, looking up at me with pure joy. I marveled at how much patience a young child like Jack must have. So we made a pact to spend the day playing to our heart's content, releasing all that bottled up patience. I knew taking the day off work would be inconvenient, but I believed it was the best thing for Jack. After explaining the situation, I managed to get some time off. We spent the morning at the park, playing until we were exhausted, then returned home for lunch. Jack seemed unusually tired and cuddled up to me like a little baby, falling asleep on my lap. Normally, he naps on the couch alone, but today he wanted to be close to me. Instead of doing housework during his nap, I decided to cherish this special moment, finding solace in watching Jack sleep peacefully. Suddenly, I heard the front door unlock, much too early for my husband James to be returning. Instinctively, I grabbed a nearby bag and swiftly hid in the bedroom closet, holding Jack close. As I listened intently, I recognized the familiar voice of the intruder. It was Jennifer. She seemed to be searching for something, muttering in frustration. Why does she have a key? What is she looking for? I wondered anxiously. Peeking out from the closet, I observed Jennifer's movements and listened to her murmurs. After rummaging through various items, she made a phone call, expressing her inability to find whatever she was searching for. Mentioning bro, presumably James, she eventually left, locking the door behind her. The mystery of what Jennifer and James were seeking lingered in my mind. I carefully laid sleeping Jack on the bed and tried to make sense of what had transpired. Perhaps James and Jennifer were searching for something belonging to me, but I couldn't fathom what it could be. The whole situation left me feeling like James was a stranger, filling me with fear. Hastily, I packed Jack's things into the bag I had grabbed earlier. Just as I finished, Jack stirred awake. "Jack, let's go to Grandpa's house," I said, taking his sleepy hand. We hurried to the station and caught the train to my parents' home, just 2 stops away. Arriving unannounced, my parents were surprised to see us. Once Jack was home, he happily engaged with our family dog, bringing a sense of normalcy to the unexpected visit. As we discussed what had happened with my parents, I shared my feelings of fear and explained the situation. I speculated that Jennifer might have been searching for my banking card for my single days, and my parents agreed it was a possibility. You see, I used to run a successful online shop for handmade goods back then, which later expanded with the help of my friends in the same business. Even after getting married and having Jack, I continued to manage the business part-time from home, with my friends overseeing its day-to-day operations. Surprisingly, I hadn't told my husband that I'm still the president of the company, although he knows about my previous success in starting a business when I was single. I'm still employed at my company, but I've kept it hidden from my husband. He believes I've stepped down from my role as president and now work part-time. There's a reason for my secrecy. After we decided to marry, I learned he spends his entire salary with no savings. He expected me to quit and become a full-time homemaker, offering only $300 for groceries. I couldn't agree to this. After heated discussions, we compromised on me working part-time. But that wasn't all. He had me sign a legal document, limiting my claims to marital assets, making me feel financially trapped. Even after our child was born, I only received money for groceries, while I covered clothing and daycare expenses. My compliance may have led him to believe I still have savings from my single days, explaining why they're searching for my old banking card. Furthermore, I've been quietly saving for our child by diverting a portion of my salary to a separate account. It's clear they're after the banking card for financial reasons. There's no other reason for those siblings to be searching, but I'm cautious with my valuables, like my banking card. So even if Jennifer or my husband search, they won't find anything. The bigger issue is Jennifer having a key and unrestricted access to our home, a situation my husband seems fine with. My father suggested keeping my banking card at our family home, so I followed his advice and secured it in our family safe. However, he raised another concern. Why is he so desperate for money? While discussing this with my parents, Jack approached us tearfully, admitting he had broken the piggy bank from my father and failed to save money in it as promised. My father was furious, his face turning red with anger. My father was on the verge of calling my husband to express his anger when my mother intervened. Let's confirm if the banking card is their real objective, she advised. Acting hastily without evidence could backfire, especially considering my husband's casual mention of divorce. He might exploit the situation, painting us as the wrongdoers to gain leverage in a divorce. So we decided to record their conversation to uncover their true intentions and consulted our family lawyer, a longtime friend of my father. Once home, I began preparing dinner as my husband arrived. I discreetly started recording on my phone, placing it face down. As expected, his first question was about the banking card's whereabouts. When I pressed for his reason, he evaded the question, growing frustrated when met with silence. My sister's in trouble, so hand over all your part-time earnings, he demanded. I refused, explaining I was saving for our child. In response, he pulled out a signed divorce paper from his bag and thrust it at me. You can't even manage without me, yet you're arrogant. It's fine not to save for our child anymore, he sneered, implying his sister took precedence over Jack. Without another word, he left me stunned. I halted my dinner preparations, stashed the divorce papers in the bag I'd readied earlier at my parents' house, and took Jack's hand, heading for the front door. If you leave now, don't bother coming back. I mean it, my husband warned. I don't want to return to a house where Jennifer can come and go freely, he added. With that, I left the familiar confines of our home. My husband bombarded me with calls and emails, all of which I ignored as I made my way to my parents' house. There, I played the recorded conversation for my parents and showed them the divorce papers my husband had handed me. They asked what I wanted to do. I admitted I'd reached my limit of patience and love, but Jack's well-being was my primary concern. My parents suggested divorce might spare Jack further emotional harm, but they also acknowledged the potential for new wounds. Lost in contemplation, Jack mentioned he was hungry, prompting my mother to whip up his favorite meal, hamburgers. She had anticipated our arrival and stocked up on ingredients accordingly, ready for us to return home at any moment. Tears streamed down my cheeks uncontrollably. I couldn't contain them. Jack's delighted reaction to the hamburger was heartwarming. I wish Grandma could make these every day, he beamed, sharing his joy with my mother. That's because each bite is filled with love, she responded tenderly. Then, Jack fed me a piece, insisting it was filled with love and urging me not to cry. It was too much. I cried even harder, seeing Jack's concern for me. My father intervened, telling Jack these were tears of joy because I was so happy with his sweet gesture. He explained it gently, shielding Jack from any worry. Then my mother hugged Jack, moved by his innocence. I glanced at my father, noticing his struggle to hold back tears, his emotions mirroring mine. When I remarked on the beauty of family, Jack surprised me. Dad says his family is just Jennifer, but my family is Grandma and everyone else, he said, drawing a contrast. My father agreed, emphasizing our bond. Then, with a playful gesture, he asked if we wanted to be a family forever, lifting our spirits with his humor. Reflecting on our joyful meal, I realized it had been too long since we had relaxed together like this. It was a moment of clarity. I needed to proceed with the divorce. I explained my decision to Jack slowly, fearing his reaction. Surprisingly, he seemed relieved, finding solace in staying with the family. Even our older dog, back at my parents' house, received a warm embrace from Jack, who declared him his little brother. With clarity and determination, I knew what had to be done next. It was time to take action. The next day, I made arrangements to meet with my father's friend's lawyer to discuss my situation and finalize my decision to divorce. That night, Jack opted to sleep with my father and our faithful dog, Max. Meanwhile, I shared a bed with my mother, reminiscing about childhood stories until we both drifted off to sleep. The following morning, I reluctantly powered on my phone to find an overwhelming number of missed calls and emails from James, over 200 in total. His messages oscillated between harsh criticisms and desperate pleas for forgiveness, leaving me unsure of his true intentions. With a heavy heart, I decided to switch off my phone once more. In the afternoon, my lawyer arrived, and we delved into the details of my situation, reaffirming my resolve to proceed with the divorce. After thorough discussions, we officially signed the necessary paperwork, and my lawyer assured me he would meet with James the following day. 2 days later, the lawyer returned to my parents' house, and I eagerly inquired about the outcome. To my surprise, it transpired that Jennifer had a severe shopping addiction and frequented male strip clubs, borrowing a substantial sum of money from loan sharks with James as her guarantor. Their plan was to utilize my savings to repay the debt. When repayment was delayed, James confessed but expressed his desire for reconciliation, hoping for Jack and me to return. However, I remained steadfast in my decision to divorce, having already initiated the legal process. James, distraught, asked the lawyer if I could marry someone else. Despite his reluctance to let go, the lawyer affirmed my freedom to pursue future relationships. It was a difficult moment, witnessing James's emotional breakdown as he grappled with the reality of our impending divorce. He finalized the agreement by signing a promissory note to pay Jack $500 in child support each month. With that, the lawyer deemed the matter settled. Later, I received a call from my ex-husband. Our conversation brief but poignant. His once vibrant voice now sounded subdued, speaking with an air of calmness. It dawned on me that he may have believed financially binding me would deter me from seeking divorce, even if I grew to resent him. He confessed to always prioritizing Jennifer, his younger sister, out of a sense of brotherly duty ingrained since childhood. However, he now acknowledged this as a mistake, admitting his jealousy towards Jack, feeling as though I had been taken away from him, despite once loving our son. when he informed me that he and Jennifer had repaid her debts and expressed his intention to reconcile. Pleading for me not to remarry, I firmly asserted that my love for him had faded, and there was no chance of reconciliation. Our conversation ended with tears exchanged over the phone as I wished him happiness before he hung up. In the aftermath, I leaned on my parents for support, making arrangements to transfer Jack to a different daycare while reviving my career as a businesswoman. Unable to keep silent any longer, I disclosed everything to my in-laws, who were outraged by the betrayal and resolved to disown James and Jennifer. Now they live together in a modest apartment, their once close sibling bond deteriorating under the strain of their circumstances. As for me, I've chosen to view their plight as a form of personal retribution. After my dad's funeral, when everyone was talking about who gets what from his money and stocks, my brother-in-law, who's married to my sister Kelly, suddenly said that all of it, including $5 million, should go to Kelly, the oldest sibling. My sister and brother-in-law were happy, but the lawyer told them they couldn't just decide that. My name's John Watson, I'm 42, work in sales, and have a wife and 2 kids. My dad owned a big part of a company, and even though he was old, he still worked. My sister Kelly, who's older than me, has always been a bit of a problem for our parents with her bad behavior. My sister, who's now in her middle years, still doesn't have a steady job and just lives her life however she wants. I've never really liked her, so I've always kept my distance. Then, when she turned 50, out of the blue, she brings home this guy and says, "I'm getting married." The guy, Chris Adams, is younger and good-looking, but he's pretty lazy and not very pleasant. My sister starts asking Dad for money for the wedding like it's no big deal. She blows through the cash real quick and then has the nerve to ask for more, which really upsets Dad. She figures she'll inherit everything eventually, so why not? I just watch her with a cold stare. Less than a year after she gets married, Dad has a heart attack while playing golf and passes away a few days later. It hits me hard, and I feel really sad. The sudden news of Dad's passing shocked all his friends, and our phones wouldn't stop ringing with condolences. But I couldn't just sit there and cry. I took charge, helping my stunned mom with all the arrangements for the funeral. As usual, my sister was nowhere to be found, off doing her own thing. After the funeral, utterly exhausted, Mom and I finally got a chance to catch our breath. But the very next day, a lawyer showed up at our door to talk about Dad's will. Mom and I already knew what was in it, but my sister and her husband barged in, clueless about the whole thing, and dropped a bombshell. All of Dad's stocks and the $5 million inheritance will go to my wife, the oldest daughter. So, hands off. Mom and I were speechless at their audacity. "We did it, Kelly. Now we're set for life," cheered my brother-in-law, fist pumping with joy. The lawyer, clearly surprised, spoke up, "Hold on a minute." As my sister glared, the lawyer gave them a stern look and said, "Kelly, you're not entitled to any inheritance." My sister and her husband were stunned, protesting, "That can't be right. Kelly's the oldest daughter, she should get everything." It was clear my brother-in-law had been banking on that inheritance, assuming my sister would get it all. Their expressions shifted as the lawyer spoke softly. "Did you not know? Kelly is not Mr. Watson's biological child." Suddenly, my sister's face paled, her eyes darting to our mother. "Mom?" Our mother wore a complex expression. While I had always known my sister was a half-sibling, it seemed she had been kept in the dark. She began shaking our mother, almost frantic. "Mom, what does this mean?" "Kelly, you're from my previous marriage," our mother muttered, shaken by my sister's grip. My sister, who had often teased me about being the favorite child, now wore a stunned expression. But if she was legally adopted, she should still have inheritance rights. My brother-in-law interjected, his voice rising. "Isn't that so, Kelly?" "Yes, that's what I thought," my sister replied, but our mother shook her head. There had been no legal adoption. Both my sister and brother-in-law seemed incredulous. "That can't be. I'm the oldest daughter. Even Dad said so." My sister's anger turned towards me. "I won't let you take everything," she snapped, to which I responded, irritated by her entitlement. "After all the support Dad gave you, you still say that? Be quiet." "I'm his rightful heir." My sister and brother-in-law protested. But what's wrong with a father supporting his daughter? I sighed, feeling the weight of the situation. While it's normal for parents to support their children, my sister had been using my father's money to settle debts and deal with various troubles. Mrs. Watson, John, who had been silent until now, suggested, "Why don't we let Kelly see the will too?" "The will?" "I have no idea about that." My sister panicked, although it was her own fault for not paying attention. Dad wanted us all to discuss the will's contents when he made it, but my sister brushed it off and went out to play instead. When I pointed this out, my brother-in-law gave her a fierce glare. "What were you thinking?" This was important. Faced with the question of what to do next, they agreed to hear it. The lawyer then revealed Dad's will, stating clearly that the inheritance was for me and my mother. It also explained why Dad didn't adopt my sister. Initially, he intended to, but he grew disappointed with her behavior towards me, her half-brother, and her reckless spending as she got older. So, I actually have no inheritance rights. Realizing this, my sister was stunned. "Damn it! What now?" Suddenly, my brother-in-law raised his voice, accusing, "You lied to me. You said you had money." His demeanor turned aggressive, leaving my mother and sister shocked. But I wasn't surprised. My brother-in-law had often shown his greed. Perhaps he even married my sister for her money. "Kelly, don't come back until you've got some money," he commanded. "Wait, Chris? What do you mean? I thought I was going to be wealthy. What a letdown." Roughly pushing past my sister, my brother-in-law stormed out of the room. Left behind, my sister glared at us, her face red with anger, and cried out to our flustered mother, "Mom, why didn't you have me adopted? It's not fair that only you get the inheritance. I should have gotten something too. But you didn't handle it right. This is awful, Mom," she sobbed, making a scene. I was taken aback by her outburst, but the lawyer seemed unfazed, perhaps accustomed to such drama. "Why does he get everything?" "Because I'm Dad's son," I responded, and my sister's eyes filled with anger as she lunged at me, shouting, "You! It would have been better if you were never born." I thought to myself that even if I hadn't existed, Dad would likely have made the same decision given my sister's character. Before I could say anything, the lawyer calmly intervened, "Kelly, if you continue like this, it will involve the police," making my sister flinch, possibly recalling her past shoplifting incidents. "Kelly," our mother called out, tears in her eyes. 6 months had passed, and the inheritance proceedings went smoothly without any hiccups. Though my sister and brother-in-law grumbled for a bit, the lawyer's efficient management left them with no room to meddle. My mother gave my sister some money, but I refrained from commenting on it. What bothered me most was their sudden disappearance with the funds, displaying their blatant gold-digging behavior, which left a sour taste in the mouths of our relatives who were aware of the situation. One day, I took my mother, wife, and daughter out for a meal. Thanks to my wife's suggestion, my mother, who had been somewhat withdrawn since Dad's passing, seemed more cheerful in the company of her adorable granddaughter. "Hey, Mom, why don't you come live with us?" I proposed. "But you know Kelly might drop by sometimes. She only shows up when she needs money, right? Don't be too accommodating with her," my mother hesitated. Her reluctance was understandable, given that my sister is her biological daughter. Plus, if our family moved into the family home, my sister might stir up trouble again. Respecting her concerns, I simply asked her to think it over as I drove towards the family home to drop her off. As we pulled up, we noticed lights on in the supposedly empty house. It wasn't the time for the helper to be there, so maybe my sister had returned. With that in mind, I parked the car in the garage. "Let's pop in for a quick coffee," I suggested. As we stepped out of the car and headed towards the entrance, a car suddenly swerved towards us, narrowly missing us. Reacting to my daughter's cry, I instinctively shielded my wife. "Ouch! Thankfully, the car only grazed me, but I was thrown into a nearby flower bed, taking a hard knock. The car came to a halt after hitting the garage entrance. "Are you all right, honey?" My wife and daughter rushed over to help me up, while my mother stood trembling at the entrance, understandably shaken. Panic ensued. I was rushed to the hospital by ambulance and had to stay overnight. Later, I learned that the driver was Chris Adams, my brother-in-law. He claimed to the police that he mistook the accelerator for the brake, but I doubted his explanation. When my mother and sister visited me in the hospital, my sister looked at me coldly and remarked, "You're surprisingly resilient, aren't you?" I couldn't help but think that if I had been seriously injured, my mother would have inherited everything. "Too bad for you," I said with a smirk. My sister visibly tensed. "You were counting on it, weren't you?" I noticed her discomfort as she looked away. "Well, Mom told me she plans to waive her inheritance from me, so causing such an accident was pointless." My sister seemed taken aback by this revelation. It appeared incomprehensible to her that someone would refuse what they could inherit. "I have a wife and kids, so Mom asked me to pass it on to them. That's what parents do." But, my sister stuttered. "I even made a will early on, following Dad's example." I continued, leaving my sister speechless. "So unfortunately, my share won't be going to Mom anymore." My sister trembled and shook as she stared at me. "Can't you at least give me some? There's $5 million, right?" When I firmly refused, my sister's face contorted into a furious expression as she grabbed my collar. "Give me half. I'm your sister." I regarded her with pity as she continued to scream in an unsettling tone, perhaps driven to madness by the prospect of the inheritance. "Don't you realize that your greediness would disappoint Dad?" My sister's face flushed with anger as she reached for my throat. "Kelly, what are you doing?" My mother returned, her voice raised, as nurses arrived to escort my sister out. Although my mother seemed inclined to defend my sister, it was clear that my sister had directed insults towards her too. Where did I go wrong in raising her? It was heartbreaking to hear my mother say this with sadness in her voice. Shortly after, my mother fell ill. As her condition worsened, my wife and I stepped in to assist with transportation and household tasks at the family home. This seemed to upset my sister, likely because she had encountered my wife during her visits to ask for money or had heard about our help from our mother. One day, my sister called me abruptly. "From now on, we'll take care of Mom. You two don't need to come," she declared. "What's this all about?" I tried to reason with her, but my sister didn't listen and hung up, claiming it was already decided. I confirmed with my wife, who had received the same message and been dismissed. Concerned about my sister's lack of experience in caregiving or household duties, I quickly reached out to my mother. Surprisingly, my brother-in-law had some caregiving experience. At that point, my mother was still quite independent, so it seemed manageable for the time being. I felt a bit relieved. However, within a month, my mother was rushed to the hospital by ambulance due to a medication dosage error. She appeared alarmingly frail when we arrived. The doctor was puzzled. My mother had never made such a mistake before. While my wife stayed with her, I went back to the family home, which was in disarray. The fridge was empty, despite my mother's love for cooking, and it seemed the hired help had been canceled without discussion. I felt ashamed for even considering trusting my sister and was furious. A significant amount of money had been withdrawn from my mother's bank account, even though her bank card and PIN were secured in the safe. Thankfully, the account containing the inheritance was untouched in a safe deposit box. But most of the funds allocated for living expenses were gone. I gathered essential items for my mother's hospital stay, along with her bank card, and returned to explain the situation to her. Did Kelly. My mother seemed unaware of the bank card situation. However, when I inquired about the medication error, she looked somber and confessed that it was prepared by my brother-in-law. "Mom, perhaps it's best not to allow my sister into the house anymore," I suggested. "John, I promised to take care of you, but the house is in such disarray, and you've lost so much weight. Have you been eating properly?" My mother's words weighed heavily on me. "Mom, you should come live with us." I'll build a home where we can all be together, I proposed, causing my mother to break down in tears. However, her health continued to deteriorate despite the doctor's efforts. Perhaps the incident with my sister had weakened her heart. She never recovered and eventually passed away, almost as if following my father. Upon returning to the family home to make funeral arrangements, I discovered that all the valuables had vanished. It appeared my sister and brother-in-law had taken them in their desperate pursuit of money. Standing amidst the empty rooms, I was first shocked and then consumed by a fierce anger. I vowed to hold them accountable for their actions. The day after my mother's funeral, my sister and I were scheduled to meet with the lawyer, presumably to discuss the inheritance. Too bad. Mom's inheritance rightfully belongs to me, her daughter, my sister boldly declared. I couldn't help but chuckle at her statement, as it seemed she was gravely mistaken. Let's see what the will says, I suggested. As the lawyer unveiled the will, my sister's face drained of color. No, this can't be. Kelly is not entitled to inherit anything. That's Dad's final wish, my brother-in-law exploded. However, the lawyer calmly reiterated the same statement. This is absurd. Kelly is that old woman's biological child. My brother-in-law erupted, sweeping items off the table in anger. You can't deceive us. Give us the inheritance now. Chris, did you try to harm my mom? I confronted him. He shot me an irritated glare. What? I never did such a thing, he retorted. Then why was there a mistake with her medication? I pressed further. My brother-in-law scowled in annoyance. Who cares about that, John? It's outrageous that we're not getting any inheritance, my sister interjected, seemingly losing her composure. What have you done? I asked her, stunned. It seemed she hadn't rushed over after hearing about our mother's passing, but had been banking on the inheritance to cover her expenses. Tell me this isn't true. I'm getting nothing, my sister demanded of the lawyer. Well, the lawyer began, carefully explaining the legal distribution of the inheritance. However, after deducting the amount my sister had withdrawn and the items she had sold, there was almost nothing left. She scratched her head in frustration. This outcome was reached after consulting with the lawyer in advance, I interjected. That can't be. It can't be this little, my sister muttered to herself, clearly dissatisfied. Having relied on our parents without ever experiencing the hardships of work, she seemed out of touch with reality. I couldn't contain my contempt for her. Mom thought you'd take care of her, but you just took her money and abandoned her, you ungrateful person. I couldn't hold back my anger. Taking care of someone costs money, you know? What are you talking about? My sister shot back. Then show me the detailed expenses you used for Mom's living costs. I'll cover the necessary expenses, I challenged her, extending my hand. My sister's face paled, and her lips trembled. I don't have that. Without receipts, it won't be recognized, the lawyer emphasized, leaving my sister speechless. Facing her, my brother-in-law attempted to sway me with a pleading tone. John, your sister really needs help. Can't you lend her a hand, even just a little? I declined firmly, feeling my frustration growing, and it seemed my brother-in-law was reaching his limit too. If everything had gone as planned, Kelly would have had the entire inheritance by now, he muttered. What do you mean by that time? I questioned, but before I could delve deeper, my brother-in-law let slip a revealing comment. Because of this guy, nothing ever goes smoothly. I was supposed to get a new car, but all I got was barely enough for repairs. My sister desperately tried to interject, but it was too late. That's a serious accusation. It sounds like fraud, the lawyer remarked, holding a recorder and smiling at the couple. What? That's illegal. I clearly stated at the outset that this meeting would be recorded, and you both agreed to it. My brother-in-law paled upon realizing his mistake. Turning to him, I declared, Chris, I'll be pressing charges for that accident. Don't be absurd. There's no evidence. You've just provided the evidence yourself. My sister burst into tears and shook my brother-in-law in frustration. You fool, it's all your fault. What are we going to do now? Eventually, my brother-in-law faced criminal charges. His previous offenses also came to light, leading to his detention by the police. My sister, implicated as an accomplice, received a lesser sentence. However, unable to afford her rent, she sought help from relatives but was rejected by everyone. As for me, I continued to work diligently without relying on any inheritance, finding solace in the dividends from stocks as a small pleasure.